Hey everybody, thanks for watching today's episode. We have a very special guest with us. Her name is Crysta Marshall, and she is the founder of Defined with Purpose. They help students from age 5 all the way up to 25, and they mentor them and help them to learn their purpose, their value, and their worth. And they also help to rehabilitate and counsel and mentor students who have dealt with sexual abuse. And so I'm so happy to have her with us today, and hopefully you'll be able to get something out of our conversation and continue the conversation. So Crysta, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you a little secret that I was a little nervous to meet you. The night that we were at your event, you had the fashion show for Defined with Purpose. And my son was in the fashion show because he's a model with the agency that you guys used. And so after, I had no idea what it was going to be about. And when I got there, I was just there to support him. And then I'm walking around this excellent event and just this beautiful place, and I'd never even seen it before, didn't even know it existed, and I'm walking around with these incredible vendors, and then I'm sitting there listening to people share their story about how they ended up with Defined with Purpose and what it was all about, and I was just blown away. I had no idea that it was a Christian event, or that you were a Christian, and that this was something that God had put in your heart. Like, I had no idea. I was just there to support him. And so after it was over, I was like a little nervous to approach you, but I'm so glad that I did, and glad that we were able to have a conversation, and so that I could hopefully share some of the things that you have learned and what you're doing with other people, and kind of open up the conversation. So tell me a little bit about how you got started. How did you, how long have you been open, and kind of who you've serviced?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for coming and speaking with me. There's no way I probably would have went up to you and like, hey, because sometimes I can be shy. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I guess to kind of tell a little bit about the organization and where it started, we initially started in 2010. And so at that time, I was modeling full-time, traveling all over the world. And it was just interesting because everywhere I went, young women or some of the models would come up and talk to me, and they would be like, hey, this is going on with me, or this situation is going on with me. And at those times, I would just kind of give the advice that I had. And at that time, previously, I wasn't really have a full understanding of who God was in my own life. So I was just giving the worldly knowledge that I knew. Like, if the guy was bad, I'm like, break up with him. It just seemed practical to me until I got into my own relationship that was kind of traumatizing. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, when I was in that relationship, unfortunately, he was abusive, this guy that I was in a relationship with. And that was the father of my daughter. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of going through that relationship, and at that time, I remember I was pregnant with my daughter. I dedicated my life to God at that moment. And there was no turning back at that moment, because I saw what my life was going to, and I knew that there had to be a better way. So I gave my life to God, and that moment, he unfortunately didn't believe in God at all. Mm-hmm. And so when I said, okay, God, all right, I'm yours, I didn't know it was going to escalate everything to a whole different level. And so it definitely became more abusive, and it was just unfortunately not a good situation. But in that time, as I consecrated myself more to God, he started kind of downloading some of the information that I was giving others, but it was more wisdom. Like, I was young, I was like 26. I didn't have that kind of wisdom. So what he was telling me was basically the basis of Defined with Purpose for young women to have an understanding of their value and who they were. And so at that moment when he's giving me this information, I'm still going through it in my home because we were living together at the time, but God was kind of my refuge and my place of safety. And so I would take what I learned and what I taught the other girls from all over the world when we would speak, and then my personal experience as well, and it formulated into a curriculum, believe it or not. And so at this moment, I had already had my daughter. I had moved away from the situation that I was living in with my boyfriend at the time. And I started making a curriculum for the organization, and my daughter was maybe 5 months, and I'm living in a townhome by myself with my daughter. And I would go to work, come back home, and just write curriculum. And I didn't know I was building Define with Purpose at that moment until one day it was like, okay, this is a nonprofit organization. Let's do something with it. And so that's the way that Define with Purpose was initially founded.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it was interesting.
So what was there a point, like at what, do you feel like there was a conversation, or do you feel like there was a moment, there was something that was like a pivotal turning point where you were like, enough, like I'm done with this relationship? Because as you know, there's a lot of people that struggle. They're stuck in an abusive relationship, and it's like, what does it take for you to see that you're worth more than this, that you don't have to put up with this? Was there something that happened, or was there a conversation that was had, or was there like a light bulb moment?
I didn't grow up, like my parents are still together, and they're still together this day. So, and they had a loving, great relationship. So I always had an example of what it should be like. But in my mind, I thought that what I was doing was okay. And I didn't see it as bad as it was. So I kind of understand at times when people don't immediately know that they're in an abusive relationship. But it was honestly God. It was a time where I was pregnant, and he just put the strength inside of me saying, okay, you're about to have a child. Do you want your young child to grow up in the same situation that you're in? And I did not. That was the thing for me that just woke me up. And I was like, okay, yes, I'm pregnant, but I'm going to make this work. I didn't want to be a single mother. I did it because it always seems like it's so much worse. But I was strong, and I didn't know how strong I was until I had to exude my strength. And God gave me that strength. So I was like, okay, it's time to go. And so I left at that moment where I knew that I didn't want my daughter to grow up in that same situation, because a father is an example to the daughter of what she's going to marry. And I didn't want to perpetuate that into her life.
So did she continue into a relationship with him?
So after that, I moved away because I was living in Miami at the time. So I moved away, and we set up a parenting plan in order for him to be able to establish and have a relationship with her. Fortunately, you really want to not get in the way of a father-daughter relationship, even though he wasn't great for me. You always assume or think that it's going to be different with the daughter. And so it wasn't. And that was the unfortunate part. So we found out when my daughter was 3 years old, she would go visit. And this time I was living in Atlanta, in Georgia, and he was living in Miami. And so she would go visit on occasion, for spring breaks, according to the plan that we had in order. And she came back one day super clingy and super just different. And she was 3 at the time. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? What's going on? And so she wouldn't leave my side. She didn't want to go anywhere. She didn't want to be around any other person except for me. And so I remember one day we were sitting on the couch, and I'm like, what's going on, baby? What's going on? And then she told me the mean man touched her pee-pee. And those are her words when she was 3. And I'm like, huh. It didn't click. It didn't register. And yes, I knew what I had experienced in the relationship. But again, your mind will disassociate, what's going on with the reality. And so I was like, okay, so I hear you. And so I was like, who's the mean man? Who's the mean man? And so she just wouldn't tell me anything else. And so she started complaining of burning, in her private area. And so I took her to the doctor. I believe it was a couple of days later. And unfortunately, she had a tear in her private part. And so I found out that she was being sexually abused through conversations and through therapy and through that whole process. And that's when I was like, okay, we have to do something about this. So the sexual abuse piece came, and my daughter was definitely not the same kid. She was so vibrant and happy. And then after that happened, she was diagnosed from the therapist for PTSD and depression at the age of 3. And what does that even look like for a 3-year-old? Every loud noise, it was a trauma for her, or something that would just make her, unfortunately, go to the bathroom on herself immediately, or animals. She was so scared of so many different things because of the experience. And as the story went on, and as we started finding out more, they were making child pornography with her. And so knowing all of this and doing something about it, those, again, 2 different things. Like as a mother, as a single mother, you want to just take your child and run and leave and not have to face it. But God wouldn't allow me to do that. I was like, okay, what do I do? And I remember one night I was laying on the couch and I was so broken at this time because I did everything I felt like I was right, but God was like, no more secrets. And I heard that and I'm like, what's no more secrets? What's no more secrets? And that's the part of the organization that we help the young people that have been sexually abused have an understanding of their value, worth, and purpose. And so the organization and then this thing that I'm finding out about my daughter just kind of collided. And he's like, this is part of what you're supposed to be doing, is helping these families overcome this. And I'm like, okay, I got it, but I need help, because I felt depressed. I felt sad. I felt lonely. I was living in Atlanta. My family lived in Kansas. So I was here with my daughter all by myself, just modeling. And I didn't have the resources or opportunity to really just stop everything that I was doing and just go into the organization. But I had to deal with this with my daughter. And I was so thankful that I had a job and a place and everything to where I could devote my time 100% to her. And so we went into therapy. I would work with her, just building her up and encouraging her and doing whatever God was telling me to do and working with the therapist to really help her get rehabilitated back into that place of healing that she needed. And so through this process, we're also going to court because the first conversation was that I was blamed for it and that I had done this to her. And so they were trying to take custody of her from me immediately. And so when that happened, that again even breaks you even more because first you find out that your child has been sexually abused. And then the second thing is that they're blaming you and then they're trying to take your love away from you. And so I'm like, God, I didn't sign up for this, at all. But it's so great because I didn't turn back when it got tough. And I just kept walking when it got tough. And I kept going when it got tough because God gave me that strength to do that. Because I promise you, I would have ran. I would have fainted if it wasn't for his strength because it was tough. And I can't say it enough. It was hard.
So with your battle in court, I imagine that's like a whole unknown world that you just encountered. So how did you navigate that? Was there people to tell you okay, you need to call this lawyer and you need to think about this? And I mean, how did you navigate that? Because that's like a whole nother world.
So, it's funny because me and my family were really close. And so I'd call my parents for everything. Hey, Mom, how do I make this? Or how do I cook this? Hey, Dad, what is this? Or how do I fix this? And you can't do that when those situations. God is I'm here. Because my parents couldn't help me. I looked for them to help me. I looked for them to have the answers. And they didn't have them because they didn't know. We had never experienced something like this. So it was my parents. It was me. I have a godmother as well that went with me. And we just walked the process together. It was definitely trial and error. Our first attorney was not great, so we got into court and it was not the best experience ever. So we left and we were like, okay, we have to find somebody that believes in us and believes us, because not only are you walking in this place looking like the guilty person, but you want to be vindicated. You want people to believe in you, and that's not what you're always walking into. So we had to, it was trial and error. So we found an attorney that was amazing. And not only was she awesome, she explained things to us and she went step by step to give us an understanding of what the process looks like. And so I was just vivid as far as taking notes. Made sure that I was there. I made sure that my mind wasn't consumed by the what ifs. It was really easy to consume your mind with the what if she gets taken away? What if they think that you've done this? What if? And God was like, stay here with me. He gave me this vision of me walking on a tightrope. And if I took my eye off of him at the end of the tightrope, I would fall. So I had to keep my mind and my eyes on him. And anytime I got off of that, I can tell you, Pastor Charla, I knew I was going to go into a dark place. So I had to stay here with him. And so that helped me with the legal side and the legal aspects, because court is intimidating and it's scary, And so especially if you have never, that was the first time I had ever been in court. And we were going consistently because we were in trial for 2 weeks, probably every 2 weeks we were going to court. So
how long did that process take until you finally got the verdict that you were hoping for?
The last hearing that I had was last June.
Wow. So
it has been probably about 5 years that we've been in court for the process. Yeah, it's a long time. but you can't faint,
Yeah.
So it's definitely a long time. And right now where we stand as far as the hearing and the court thing for myself personally is that my daughter's father and their family, they still have supervised visitation with her. So it's not even what I expected it to be. But in that, I had to learn so much in the process of forgiveness and learn of his ways aren't our ways and look at the bigger picture of the situation. For instance, we could be their only hope that they have in their life, regardless of what they've done to us, regardless of any of that. Like, we could be the only hope that they've ever seen or they ever will see. They unfortunately practice Santeria, which is a form of witchcraft, and that's what they believe in. And so every time, every visit, every time that we're going there, I have to say, God, here, this situation is in your hands. This is yours. And I trust in him and I believe in him. My daughter's in his hands. So I've learned to let go of a lot of stuff, just because of the process of every time having to see them and go forth. And I had to learn how to forgive regardless if the verdict says they go to jail or not. I had to learn how to live and teach my daughter how to live regardless of what happened at the end of that. So.
Wow. So how is she doing? How does she feel? How is she navigating all of this?
So, my daughter now, she's 9. She is at our organization. She's one of our junior mentors. So she helps the young kids that comes into the organization that have been sexually abused as well. So that to me, like, it just blows my mind to see where she was to the fact of her being 9 now and teaching the kids their value or how to ride a hoverboard or all of these things just to have them really have a place of just refuge, And so she's doing amazing, and she gets occasional check-ins with our therapist, and she's right on track. And I'm just thankful because I have definitely seen a complete and full healing of things in her. And on occasion, she has questions. On occasion, she'll bring something up or want to know about something, but it's from a place of, Mom, I want to know, as opposed to, Mommy, this hurts,
So I think I remember that at the event, she was standing up there with you guys, and I think you talked about maybe a conversation that y'all had in the car. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about that conversation?
Yeah, so it was a few weeks before the fashion show, and again, that's like our annual fundraiser, and Gia's been going every year. And so this year, she was like, Mommy, I want to talk. And I was like, well, you want to talk where? Because my daughter, she's outgoing, but not in front of a lot of people. And she's like, I want to tell my story now. And I said, okay. And so as time kind of she's like, okay, can you tell my story? And I was like, yes. And I don't ever want her to see herself or feel as though she's a victim. I always want her to see the outcome of the positive side of it. And so I was like, yeah, I'll tell it, but I want us to be able to tell your story, not because of what happened to you, but how you've overcome it. And she was like, you know what, Mommy? I'm actually happy that it happened to me. I can't say I'm happy it happened to me, but I'm thankful that it happened to me. And I said, how come? Like, why would you say that? She was like, because since it happened to me, we've been able to help hundreds of families that have the same things happen to them. So because it happened to me, we can help so many other people. And I was like, my mind was blown, because this is an 8-year-old at the time telling me how she's thankful of the traumatic situation happening to her because she's been able to use her example to help so many other people. And at times I'm gleaning from her wisdom and from her strength because as adults, we see people or people that have hurt us and we want to still be mad. But I see her as she watches them or sees them. She has her armor on and she goes with God and she knows that she's safe and she knows that she's protected and she has that childlike faith, that she's doing God's work. So and for me, I'm like, okay, cool. You're my mom,
That's so great. What a strong girl. And that just even shows just that for one thing, the strength of God and the sovereignty of God and the protection of God, but also the amazing job that you've done instilling that value and that worth into her so that she does feel that way, so she feels strong. So way to go, Mom. You did a great job.
Thank God it wasn't me, because I told you I would have fainted and ran.
Yeah. So with the clients that you're able to see, so she's mentoring, you're mentoring, and your somewhat new husband,
yes,
he's mentoring.
Absolutely.
And so you see guys and girls. And so tell me a little bit about the program that you have set up. So how many weeks is it, and kind of some of the things maybe you cover?
Sure. So our program, it runs from 6 weeks, and we have a 6-week program just for people to have an understanding of their value, worth, and purpose, whether they've been sexually abused or not. High school girls, middle school girls, we get that all the time, just as far as like being in school and just, growing up, you need someone sometimes to just kind of give you an understanding of something outside of your perspective, So we mentor from that age for 6 weeks. And then we have a program from 12 to 18 weeks, which is called our No More Secrets program. And that's the one that specifically works with people that have been sexually abused. And in that program, we also cover the cost of therapy and legal fees, because for my story, it was over $250,000 for me to keep my daughter safe in the process of a year and a half. And so we don't ever want someone to have to worry about paying for those fees, when there's sexual abuse going on. So our heart is to just heal the brokenhearted, and whatever way we can do that, we do that. And so that program, from 12 to 18 weeks, we're discussing everything, as well as in our 6-week program as well, from relationships, choices, making good choices in life, and not making choices from a lens of hurt or a lens of anger. We talk about forgiveness, which again is huge. And that was one of those lessons that God liked to really make sure I understood, Also, we talk about comparison as well, for people not to compare or look at another person's life or another person's story and wish that was theirs, because how God can so turn everything out for the good for the other person. So that's another thing that we discuss. Of course, value. Even just like being you, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does it mean to be you? What has God called for you? What are some special gifts and talents that you have? And the organization, essentially, we just want to make sure that we're building people up to really have a full understanding of who they are. So regardless of the way that life hits them or comes their way, that they'll be secure and ready to go forward and not have to worry about, life just bringing you down and not being able to overcome.
I love that. And I also love the fact that you have, once they've gone through the program, they can be trained to turn around and mentor someone else. So it's like the whole pay it forward. Like, you've been poured into, now you can turn around and help someone else walk through that. So when you're working with these students and your clients, is there a resounding theme that you see in them? I was thinking of like two things. I was thinking, one, if a parent wanted to know if their child was struggling with their own worth or their own value, or what would be some signs, and even maybe some signs that there has been, sexual abuse that maybe they're not aware of that has happened. Is there any red flags that they can look for?
Yeah, so I think the first question I can answer, as far as to see if someone has an understanding of their value or their purpose. A sign that you can see is age. I mean, a lot of times you'll see a lot of young people don't have an understanding of that. And so what we're doing in the program, and what I always suggest parents to do, is just to cultivate who the kid is, who their true essence is, and just kind of help them build up into like who they are. Because I didn't know who I was until I went through a trauma, and then God started showing me that. So, and I was 23, 24, 25, thinking I knew, and I didn't know. So it's just more or less of really having the right people and the right groups around you that can really help you push through to see what the trueness is of you. So again, parents to encourage their children, parents to take time to see what their kids are into, what are they talking about, what's important to them. And then as a parent sees those things, they can cultivate and like build up the gifts and the talents in that child, because they're always there for a reason. And then for some of the signs you can see for a person that's been sexually abused, it really varies depending on age. But just some of the overall signs you can see is isolation, especially for a lot of the younger children, clinginess as well. For the older children, you can see isolation. For some of the younger children, you can see clinginess. Cutting is a sign of that. Alcoholism, promiscuity, perfectionism, which sometimes parents are like, oh, my child is doing amazing, they're getting straight A's, but they're people pleasing. it's for a reason, so there's some things behind even some of the good attributes that can have a root of negativity or a root of abuse. Some of the other signs that you may see is, I'm trying to think of some things right now. Negative self-talk, a lot of times, just not believing in themselves. For younger kids as well, them touching themselves, trying sexual play. You can see sometimes in kids, and you'll say, okay, something's up. Especially for kids to be more sexually advanced than they should at their age is a sign that there's been something or some exposure to sexual abuse or even pornography. So.
Yeah, pornography is a big deal. So there's a series that we found that's like a Bible study called the Conquer series, and it is phenomenal. It really has helped a lot of people. We've done it in some of our small groups because that's huge. I mean, it's such a huge thing. It's such a driver for some of the sexual abuse that we see. And so I'm so grateful for what you do. Like, I'm so grateful. I even, at the event that I got to be a part of, heard some of the incredible testimonies and the lives that have been changed. One of the girls that I spoke to had been, I think she was a college student, and she had been through a really traumatic situation where she had experienced rape, and it had only been like a short period of time, she said, like just a few months, and she was like, this has changed my life. This organization has changed my life, and I know that I'm going to get through this. And so thank you for what you do, and how you mentor students and help them to believe in themselves, because I do think, even adults, struggle with knowing their value and knowing their worth. And when we don't know our value and our worth, we'll settle for anything. Absolutely. And so I thank God for you, your husband, and all the mentors that you've raised up, and the changes that you're making. And so we hope that we can have you come even to our church and help us to create some mentorship programs among some of our students, and would love to see that just to continue to grow. So thank you for everything that you do and who you are, and that you listened to the voice of the Lord, that you obeyed the voice of the Lord, that you pioneered through all of that you went through and didn't give up and stayed strong, because you really are making a difference. And I just thank you so much for what you do, and I'm so happy that I got to meet you and got to talk to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate you believing in us and our organization, and even taking the time out to say hi to me, at the fashion show. So thank you so much in what you do. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope that you'll be able to continue the conversation that we started. One of the things that she talked about was no more secrets, and we know that we're only as sick as our secrets. And so if there's something that you need to talk about, make sure that you talk to somebody that you can trust. You can always call them. You can check them out on their website at definedwithpurpose.com. And of course, we would love to be able to pray with you and help you in any kind of way that we can. But just make sure that you talk about it. Keep the conversation going, because that's how things get buried, and secrets get buried, and that's how shame can begin. And so just make sure you talk about it. I'd love to for you guys to continue having this conversation, because we want to bring healing to every area of our life, and let God be a part of every single area of our life, because He can bring hope and healing to anything. And just her story alone is just proof that He can take the worst situations in life and turn it around and use it for good.